If you've been anywhere near crypto Twitter, YouTube, or even mainstream crypto news over the last few days, you've probably noticed something very familiar creeping back into your feed. Price predictions. Big ones. XRP to $10. XRP bottom is in. XRP accumulation phase. XRP to $10,000. Yeah, really. And I know exactly how that feels if you've been around this space for a while. Because on the one hand, you roll your eyes and think, here we go again. But on the other hand, there's this quiet frustration underneath it all. It's been over 10 years since XRP was created. People have waited through bear markets, lawsuit, exchange delistings, relistings, regulatory battles, hype cycles, silent cycles, and you start to wonder, when is it ever actually going to move? Is this thing just permanently stuck? Or are there a reason these conversations keep coming back? So today, instead of throwing another number at you, I want to do something slightly different. I want to look at why we're suddenly seeing so many XRP price stories at once, what they're really saying underneath the headlines, and what actually matters if you're trying to make sense of this market without losing your mind. And if you're new here, welcome. My name's Paula. And on this channel, we talk about crypto in a very real, grounded way. No overnight riches, no guarantees, no pretending this stuff is easy, because it isn't. But we also don't ignore what's happening right in front of us. So let's start with the obvious question. Why now? Why, in the middle of a messy market, are XRP headlines suddenly everywhere again? One article talks about a roadmap, a long-term target of $10. Another says an analyst who previously called a massive rally now thinks we're at the bottom. Another claims XRP millionaires are about to be made. And then you've got pieces arguing that the entire market cap argument against XRP hitting extreme prices is flawed. That's not random. This kind of clustering usually happens when three things collide at the same time. First, price pain. XRP is still significantly down from its highs. When assets pull back hard, people don't just look for exits, they look for meaning. They want to know whether this move is the end or the beginning of something else. Second, narrative hunger. After 10 years, XRP holders aren't short on patience, they're short on clarity. Every time there's a roadmap update, a quote from leadership, or a shift in how the project is positioned, people latch onto it because it feels like progress. And third, attention economics. Let's be honest, articles titled XRP consolidates amid macro uncertainty don't travel very far. This is the moment XRP millionaires are made, does. That doesn't automatically make the content wrong, but it does mean we need to slow down and separate signal from amplification. Let's talk about the roadmap story first, because this one is being framed in a very specific way. The headline makes it sound like some dramatic new reveal, as if XRP suddenly woke up and decided to become something completely different. But when you actually read it, the shift is more subtle than sensational. The messaging is about XRP moving beyond being viewed purely as a payments coin and more as part of a broader financial infrastructure, settlement, liquidity, bridging assets, things that are not flashy but are very real. And here's the important part that often gets missed. Infrastructure narratives do not translate cleanly into price timelines. Banks don't adopt things overnight, financial plumbing doesn't go viral, and systems designed to move value quietly tend to do exactly that. Quietly. So when you see a roadmap article paired with a price target, what's really happening is two different conversations being glued together for clicks. One is about what the network is trying to be. The other is about what people hope their bags will do. That doesn't mean they're unrelated, but it does mean you shouldn't treat them as the same thing. Now, I just want to pause here quickly, because this exact kind of conversation is actually why I co-host the UK Crypto Podcast with Milkshake Matty. And I think it's important to say this. Trading and investing in crypto as a retail investor can feel incredibly isolating. You're trying to read the charts, follow macro news, interpret regulation, ignore hype, and manage emotions. And most of the content online is either screaming price targets or talking down to you. On the podcast, we slow everything down. We talk through stories like this properly, why certain narratives suddenly take over, what actually matters, what probably doesn't, and where people tend to get emotionally pulled offside. It's not signals, it's not promise, it's just real conversations about markets, psychology, and how to stay sane in a space that constantly tries to push you to extremes. So if you ever feel like you're the only one thinking, can we talk about this without the nonsense? That's exactly why that podcast exists. You can catch me and Milkshake Matty weekly right here on YouTube. The weekly episodes get dropped Fridays at 7 p.m. UK time. You can access all of the podcasts as well on Spotify. All right, back to XRP. Let's move on to the second type of article making the rounds, the analyst calls. These are interesting because they usually come with credibility attached. This analyst predicted a 600% rally. This analyst called the last bottom. This analyst sees an accumulation phase. And look, sometimes analysts are right, but being right once doesn't make someone a prophet. Markets are probabilistic, not deterministic. An analyst can correctly identify a structure, a range, or a setup, and still be wrong on timing, depth, or follow through. What these pieces are really tapping into is something much more human, the desire for reassurance. When price is falling, people don't want certainty. They want permission to stay calm. An accumulation zone narrative gives people psychological cover. It says you're not early, you're not late, you're just patient. And that is powerful. But again, notice what's missing. There's no guarantee, no confirmation, just a framing that says this could be where long-term positioning happens. Which brings us to the most extreme headlines of all, the $10,000 XRP argument. This one always comes back, and every time it does, it splits the room. Half the audience laughs and switches off, the other half digs in and starts doing mental maths about how their life would change. The article arguing that the market cap objection is flawed isn't saying XRP will reach those levels. It's saying the argument used to dismiss the idea is often misunderstood. And that's the part actually worth discussing. Not because of the number, but because of what it reveals about how people think about markets. Market cap is a snapshot. It's a price multiplied by circulating supply at the last traded price. It does not represent the amount of money that flowed into an asset. It does not tell you how much capital is required to move price. And it does not account for liquidity dynamics, order books, or velocity of money. That's all true, but here's the missing context that hype articles rarely include. Just because something is theoretically possible doesn't make it structurally probable. For XRP to justify extreme valuations, you'd need not just adoption, but dominance. Not just usage, but systematic relevance. Not just relevance, but replacement of existing rails at global scale. That's a very different conversation from market cap doesn't matter. So when you see these headlines stack up together, roadmap, accumulation, millionaires, flawed arguments, what you're really watching is a narrative squeeze. Price is down, attention is drifting, and the market is trying to remind people why they cared in the first place. Now let me say something that might sound uncomfortable, but it's important. The fact that these stories keep reappearing after 10 years doesn't automatically mean XRP has failed. It also doesn't mean it's about to explode. What it means is that XRP sits in a very unusual position in crypto. It's old enough to be judged harshly, established enough to be taken seriously, and controversial enough to never be ignored. That combination creates endless cycles of hope, disappointment, and renewed belief. And if you've been holding through all of that, it's completely normal to feel conflicted when you see these headlines. Part of you wants to believe, part of you is tired of waiting, and part of you just wants someone to tell you the truth without selling you a dream. So here's my grounded take. Price predictions are a symptom, not a signal. They appear when uncertainty is high, conviction is shaky, and attention needs anchoring. They don't tell you what will happen. They tell you how people are feeling right now. If you're trading, that matters in one way. If you're investing, it matters in a completely different way. And if you're just trying to survive this market with your sanity intact, it matters emotionally more than financially. The danger here isn't reading these articles. The danger is outsourcing your patience to them. Because no headline will ever give you what only time and structure can. And that's why on this channel, I'm far more interested in helping you understand how narratives form, why they spread, and what actually changes markets over the long term, rather than telling you where price is going next. If you've made it this far, I'd love to know. When you see these XRP price predictions popping up everywhere again, do they make you feel hopeful, skeptical, or just tired? Drop a comment and tell me where you're at. And if you want more grounded conversations like this, the kind that don't insult your intelligence or promise the impossible, make sure you're subscribed. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.